Invasive species is the animals or plants that are introduced to another regions of the world and it does not belong to the environment. There are few invasive organisms that are found in this world, but some of them are the worst among all. Some of the top worst invasive species that can be found in Malaysia is caribou weed, Parthenium weed, crown of thorn, and red-eared slider tortoise.
Is Salvinia molesta, also known as caribou weed or kiambang kecil. This plant is a type of free-floating aquatic fern that can grow rapidly up to 20 cm long by fragmentation and spores. They have a cage-like structure on the fronts to keep it afloat. It can be found in tropical, subtropical, and warm temperate areas. They prefer stagnant or slow-moving water bodies such as ponds, lakes, paddy fields, and irrigation channels. Caribou weed was first introduced outside its native habitat in 1939 in Sri Lanka. It spreads to Malaysia through international ornamental plant trade as an aquarium plant. Currently, caribou weed is widespread across Malaysia except the east coast area, which are Terengganu, Pahang, and Kelantan. This plant could also possess impacts economically because it could disrupt fishing activities by clogging the nets and interfere with rice cultivation, causing the production of rice to decrease. Besides that, this weed species has the tendency to disrupt water recreation activities, transportation, irrigation, and hydroelectric generation by blocking the water bodies due to their overgrowth.
Parthenium weed is an aromatic and herbaceous plant which has a deep taproot. This plant reproduces by acid and it can be travelled in a long distance throughout water and wind, meaning it is possible to be introduced to another country. The plant will affecting crop production, animal husbandry, human health and also biodiversity. The plant can inhibit the germination of nearby plant and the herbivorous plant which eat on the weed will get a side effect such as anorexia and intestinal damage which can lead to death within 30 days.
Next, we have two types of invasive animals, and one of them is crown of thorns starfish. They are named by their long, sharp, and poisonous spines. Unlike any regular starfish, crown of thorns have up to 14 until 21 arms. And how does this cause affect the ecosystem? They feed on coral polyps and they deplete the coral ecosystem. The crown of thorns starfish changes a vibrant and colorful coral ecosystem to a lifeless graveyard. However, in a natural ecosystem, there are certain biological predators that feeds on them to keep their numbers low. For example, the triton and the helmet snail, and also the trigger and pufferfish. However, there are several ways to keep the numbers low. For example, we can take them ashore and bake them in the sun or bury them in the sand. Next, we can also inject them with compressed air and also toxins to keep their numbers low.
The red-eared slider turtle. It is also called as the red-eared terrapin. They got their name from the red-eared patches beside their head. Next, their habitat, they usually comes from the aquatic environment with their life expectancy for about 50 years to 70 years old. Furthermore, their nutrition is generally omnivorous because during juvenile state, they become carnivorous animal and when they get older, they will become a herbivore animal. So generally, they are omnivorous. Moreover, the impact that they could cause towards the environment is they could lead to competition among the local species and the pest predation transmission, and lastly the predation, because as I said before, during juvenile they are carnivorous, they eat other animals.
What it takes for an organism to be invasive. To be invasive, a species must adapt to the new area easily. It must reproduce quickly, it must harm the property, the economy, or the native plant and animals of the region. Invasive species could come via the ballast water released from the ship, cargo shipping around the world, intentionally or accidentally released from the aquaculture. Some species are brought to a new area on purpose. Often, these species are introduced as a form of pest control. Other times, introduced species are brought in as pets or decorative displays. People and businesses that import these species and do not anticipate the consequences.
Invasive alien species really cause a lot of issues towards our environment and human. So what can we do to control these invasive alien species? There are three main methods that helps to control these invasive alien species, which are biological, mechanical, and chemical method. A biological method is a method that controls the population of undesirable species by introducing another species into the environment. It is a natural mechanism and harmless that serves human purposes. An action that using physical such as hand pulling, mowing, hoeing, and cultivation in order to help remove pests or invasive species we call as mechanical methods. While the chemical method is an approachment that using toxic substances to control the disease that spread by these invasive species. There are other ways to control these invasive species besides the methods that I have mentioned earlier, which is involving the government. There are many government agencies that involve in preventing these invasive species from invading our country, such as Ministry of Agriculture, Departments of Wildlife and National Parks, Departments of Fisheries, the Forestry Department, and Departments of Veterinary Services. Despite all the efforts that control these invasive alien species, Malaysia faces challenges in handling these invasive species, which are lack of sharing information towards our local people by the experts, lack of public awareness at all levels, no proper monitoring and evaluation of introduction species status, limited research studies, and lack of political will and support of invasive species.
As a conclusion, invasive species give many disadvantages to our environment. Everyone can help in the fight against these invasive species. We should take a precautionary step in order to prevent these invasive species. First, we should not introduce these invasive species in the wild at the first place. Remove any attached invasive aquatic plants or animals on ships or boats before transporting using local waterways. Do not release aquarium fish or plants or leaf bait into the wild. You can also volunteer at your local park or other wildlife area to help remove the invasive species. Lastly, help educate others about the threat of the invasive species.